have Mandisa Thomas, the founder of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, with us this week for our series on Voices of Black Faith Freedom. Now, we want you to join in the conversation in the comments below, and we want you to spread the word on Twitter by using the hashtag Black Faith Freedom Voices. And we urge you to tag us at BJC on the Hill. All right. So, Mandy, we've we've had conversations before, and it's great to have you with our organization. You've had me on Black Nonbelievers with some of the programs you had. It's so good to have you with BJC. And so, one of the things I wanted to start off with was to ask you to tell me how Black Nonbelievers came about, and what does it mean for our audience that may have never heard of Black Nonbelievers.
Absolutely. So I'm originally a New York City native. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area with my family. And to be perfectly clear, I want everyone to understand that I identify as an atheist, which means I do not believe in any God, spirits, or supernatural beings. And there are a growing number of folks within the Black community who identify as the same, or they're questioning their religious beliefs in favor of leaving the church and leaving the God concept behind. And so, what the inspiration for Black Nonbelievers, it was originally only supposed to be local to the Atlanta area and to serve as a consistent in-person community and networking entity for Black folks who identified as atheists, non-believers, humanists, etc., and also those Black folks who questioned, they were doubting their religious beliefs, and to have that safe space for us, and also to increase our advocacy, to expand on our voices, and to let more people know that we were here, and whether you're openly identified or not, and that there is more of a community here for you, with folks who get it, with folks who understand what it is like to be Black, and also to be a non-believer, to no longer to no longer have that perspective, which can be extremely isolating. And so it was necessary to start this organization as a way to connect more of us and also amplify our voices in the process.
Glad you explained that to us. And so, one of the things that in working with you, and some people may say, well, why does BJC, a Baptist organization, want to be involved or want to hear the voices of Black nonbelievers? Aren't you about faith freedom? And to that, I answer it in twofold. BJC, if we're going to have faith freedom for all, that means for all. That just doesn't mean for people that have a faith tradition. That means for people that don't have a faith tradition. They have the same rights that we have as people that do have a faith tradition. But as a Black person, just connecting, some may say common sense, but I'm just going to say directly to the fact that religion hasn't always been right. Number one, and everybody's voice in the Black community is valuable to me. If I'm a Black person, if I'm going to exclude anybody's voices, I'm only doing the work of white supremacy if I exclude somebody's voices. So those are the two reasons that we joined together in this, and I I can't go without saying this too, that uh, two of my favorite author, James Baldwin. You know, that voice would be eliminated if I only listened to those that had faith traditions. So, with all that being said, what does faith freedom mean for Black non-believers in your eyes?
Yes, so I also want to stipulate and say that I don't think I'm speaking for all of us, but and I encourage our members and folks who are watching this to perhaps, lend their perspectives in the chat. But I will say, for most of us, that faith freedom means having freedom from faith, from subscribing to this notion of divine intervention, that there is going to be some supernatural entity that is going to come into our lives and just save us. It means the freedom to do that. It means the freedom to from that. It means the freedom to question those faith traditions and any tradition for that matter. It also means the freedom to ask the question of why so many of in our communities are still bound to this religion, which is responsible for our systemic oppression. That is responsible, that is the root in it has a root in white supremacy. That you're still following this tradition that for all intents and purposes, we're seeing those folks who stormed the Capitol last month, they still follow. And so we have to ask ourselves, we challenge these notions and also expressing our non-religious identity, whether we are openly stating we're atheists and without retribution, without retaliation, and without this idea that it is somewhat alien or foreign to our communities. And people not looking at us as if we're the bad ones. It also means, again, the freedom to expand our minds and to take in new information as it comes and to make more informed decisions, which we encourage for everyone. It doesn't mean that you absolutely have to become an atheist or a non-believer just as we are. But if you do, there's support for you. If you have those questions, that there are folks who get it. And also, it means the freedom to, once again, we talked about, you talked about James Baldwin, who, yes, was a free thinker. We are in the middle of Black History. It was started Black History Month, which has its foundations in Negro History Week, which was founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, author of The Miseducation of the Negro, who also challenged the institution of the church, who was also a free thinker. And so this is a part of our duty to re educate ourselves and to acknowledge the historic presence of free thinkers, humanists, and atheists within our communities.
I love the way you love the way you explain that, Mandy. But just because for me, so many people, as you were saying, kind of have that misconception that people are evil if they don't believe. You know, and as a black person, for me, it's kind of strange that somebody would not want freedom for another person. You know, in any form. Like if I'm free to believe, I have to want others to be free not to believe. Because if not, then I'm really not free. I,
Right. And again, this speaks to the level of institutional oppression that we've experienced and endured as a community. And also it speaks to the emotional ties that many of us still have to this faith tradition. And as we move into, as we now have access to more information, education has always been a strong component to the Black community, even when it was denied to us. It's important for us to continue to build on that and understand that the more we know, the less we need to believe. And this isn't something that people have to feel bad about, or that you had to, or that any parents or grandparents whose children become non-believers. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It means that you gave them the tools to think for themselves. You gave those critical thinking skills that all of us need. And so it's important for us to recognize and understand that diversity has always been present in our communities, and we must be prepared for those changes as they come.
and I think that's a beautiful thing that you're giving people places of healing and actually bringing families together. When some people think you're bringing, maybe thinking, oh, this person doesn't believe like us, now we got to separate from them. No, that doesn't have to happen in that community. So it reminds me of you and I have worked together on several different events. And it's funny because we almost end up sitting on the same side or, or agreeing a
Don't
lot.
you tell
And
folks that. No, I'm just kidding. No.
and you have this person that's an atheist and a person that claims the Baptist tradition because of religious freedom, we almost seem to be agreeing more than disagreeing. Do you feel that's the case for most believers and non-believers in our community? And if not, what can we do to help that along?
Actually, there are a lot of things that we agree on. We agree on, uh, especially racism and institutional injustice. We tend to, like, I know you and I we agree on like reproductive justice and issues that directly affect our communities, and also you cannot be in, or it's hard to be a person who is educated and who has all of these, all of these books and all of this information at your disposal, and not see the contradictions that are in the Bible and the contradictions that are in these religious texts. And it's hard to, it becomes harder to reconcile that these beliefs that were, that many of, our parents and our grandparents hold near and dear, is also again still responsible for a huge portion of a sense of oppression and lack of, and also a denial of freedom and liberation. So it's very difficult, and I think that that is a discussion that it's not just okay to have, it's important, it's necessary to have. It's necessary for us to sit at the table and it not be an elephant in the room conversation, because I found that there are many Christians who despise the institution of the traditional church, and I can totally respect that. But those conversations do need to go a little deeper. They need to go deeper into how psychologically it has affected many of us and how damaging it has been. And I think for many of us, once we start talking to each other, once the stigma of being a non-believer goes away, and once people can overcome that and actually express that comfortably, you find that we have more in common than not, than we don't. We all want, many of us want our communities to improve, our lives to improve, and also overall, things to, just society to improve. And so, I think that there are a lot of things that we do have in common just as human beings.
I, when I hear you talk, I think about our civil rights movement, and we look at people of faith that help bring that along, and even somebody that's atheist can acknowledge, okay, I'm glad that this faith tradition helped pull us forward. You wouldn't knock any of that, but also acknowledging there were people that didn't have a faith tradition that was pulling us forward as well. And I always love how Dr. James Cone actually pulled Black power and Black liberation theology together and tried to move us forward. So in that light, where are some opportunities that people of faith and non-believers can actually work together, or you have worked with people of faith, or in your non-believers organization, to work on a certain issue to pull us forward with that?
So there are plenty of things that we can work on. We said before, issues pertaining to racial justice, issues that pertain to church state separation, which affects all of us. And let's say reproductive justice, education. And it doesn't always have to be wrapped in a struggle, right? We can work on a lot of social events together. I know you and I, we're about the same age. We're into hip hop. We love music. And so the things that bind us as a community and as a culture, that have absolutely nothing to do or very little to do with religion at all, and pulling all of that together when it comes to the history of our communities, and also, the social structures. There are many things that we can work on. We can certainly have the conversations about interfaith, and when it comes to dating, when it comes to interpersonal relationships, because that is often a very, very sensitive subject, especially for non-believers, because unfortunately, um, when it comes to a lot of single non-believers, as soon as they mention to a potential date or partner that they're an atheist, unfortunately, the conversation stops. It goes away, and it unfortunately it limits for many believers the opportunity to find a really good partner, but simply because they don't believe in God. Now they could have everything else going for them. Now these are the conversations that, again, we also need to have, because again, if we are not discussing what is going on our personal levels, then our communities don't grow. And again, we are all living together in some form or fashion, whether we like it or not. And so, how to navigate those personal spaces, how to navigate those collective issues that affect us. So the possibilities are limitless, and I think that's one of the best parts about being a non-believer, is that we are not beholden to just one solution. There are plenty of solutions, and there are plenty of things that we can continue to work on and work through as a result. So those things and more.
And you touched on separation of church and state, and I like that, because the fact that sometimes we think that non-believers don't care about separation of church and state, and it's like, no, they have to care
Hmm.
about it. It has to be a part of who they are, and things that they're fighting for. You mentioned earlier freedom from religion, and then just as important is freedom to have religion. And so with that being the case, how have you seen, um, and not trying to pull on just our organization, have you been able to work with other religious organizations that you've seen fight for your freedom just as hard as they fight for your freedom from, just as hard as they fight for their freedom to have religion?
Absolutely, and I meant to answer that in the last question too. But yes, I've had the opportunity to connect with the Religious Freedom Center, and shout out to Dr. Sabrina Dent, who has become a very good colleague and friend. An ally to Black Nonbelievers. We have. I also like to shout out Pastor Lorenzo Neal, who is out of Jackson, Mississippi. He actually featured me on his blog talk show back in 2013, and we featured him at our fifth anniversary celebration in 2016. And we also have had Dr. Dent. We've had you and other folks who are still religious, but who also care about state church separation. I know Dr. Dent works for Americans United for separation of church and state, and so. There, we those are just some examples of organizations that we work with. I also have to give a shout out to the National Museum for African American Culture for including us in their God Talk program, which discusses millennials and Black millennials and others who are leaving religion. And so they realize that having the non religious, atheist, humanist perspective was also important to this conversation, especially as they see the numbers of the religious, like officially religious, go down.
Right, right,
So it's been, I've also been able to, we've also been able to connect with Pew Research, and also be a part of that process, and to gain some insight into how they collect data, and also they are gaining insight into. From us about how to collect that data, in order to get more responses from non-believers, and so, it's been a really, there's we're celebrating 10 years this year as an organization, and in that time, I'm happy to say that we have connected with a number of organizations, and some and many who are, now that we're, now that we're working more together, more Black religious folks who are actually interested in hearing what we have to say and actually working with us more. So I'm really, really happy about that, and I look forward to that being the case more in the future.
and you mentioned peer review, and I talk to a lot of student groups, and one of the things I get to tell them is the fastest growing segment of people in the United States are nuns.
Hmm.
And they look at me strange. I'm like, no, not Nuns. I'm talking about nuns, the ones that don't have a religious faith. Those are the fastest. And so last week I had the conversation with Reverend William Lamar, and we were talking about what can America actually learn from the Black church about faith freedom. To me, this lens where the Black non-believers can actually help believers understand the transitions that are going on with people in the United States, not just so they could try to evangelize them and bring them back, but actually to say, do you love your people? Do you
Mhm.
love being an American? Do you love having your rights and having your freedoms? Then you should listen to a segment of people that have nothing to do want nothing to do with the church, but still want to have progression in life in America here. And I want to clarify a couple of things, and if you can do it for me. I kind of sent you a question that kind of grouped everybody together. I said, forgive me for grouping everybody together, but what do you feel the biggest misconception about atheist, agnostic, non-believer, humanist community is? Is it what I just did? Everybody trying to group you together, or what would you say the biggest misconception is?
I would say that the biggest misconception is that we have nothing to draw on as far as morality, that we believe in absolutely nothing, that we have no purpose in our lives, that we just want to go out and do what others would call sin, and just, and just do whatever we want to do, and without consequence. I also think another misconception is that we're angry all the time. All we want to do is argue and fight, and certainly that does not describe all non-believers. And but I would say that the biggest conception, and I go back to something that Steve Harvey said. There was a clip of him on this show telling a woman that if a man tells you that they're an atheist, then pack your bags, because where is their moral barometer, right? Now we're talking about someone who pretty much has absolutely no business trying to, saying anything like that. But um, yeah, I would say that those are some of the biggest misconceptions. Is that, without this belief in God, that we don't have any guiding principles, that there is no accountability for us, that we just, there's a funny there's a funny notion that we eat babies. I don't know where that came from, but that's just hilarious. You gotta laugh at this stuff, right? You have to laugh at it. It's funny and it's sad. But yeah, but I would say that this idea that we have no guiding principles for our lives and that we have no morals is the biggest misconception about us.
That I'm glad you clarified that, and because I have heard that, even as I said I was going to interview you today, or have this conversation with you today. Some of my friends were like, well, how the old scripture, what does light have to do with darkness? And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, who's the light and who's the darkness here?
Mhm.
Because both all of us as humans uh, can have the corner on darkness and the corner on light at different times if you look and dip into our history of just being here, one in America, but just how it has been brought about through some of the ugliest things that have happened in America have come at the hands of people that claim a religious faith, people that will say they are this or say they are that. And so I really love the fact that you are able to, you know, really express that to people and say, no, I don't need this to have that. It's okay if you have it, and that's what guides you.
Correct.
And man, I'm just going to say this to you in conversation. Like, I love the fact that you take people at their human form. You don't care what they believe unless they're hurting somebody with their belief.
Correct. Yes.
And I think
That is
that's
correct.
something that I've learned from my humanist friends, from you, and it's like, no, 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 no. Um, see how people treat people, then you can worry about their religion. Don't worry
Right.
about their religion first, in that sense there. So and that's one of the things I've learned from you. Is there anything else you think that America can learn about faith freedom from Black non-believers? Is there a point that you would love to get across, other than the misconceptions that are out there? Is there a point you would love to get across to uh, Americans that they can learn from your community?
Yes, when it comes to overcoming polarization, when it comes to overcoming this sense of struggle, especially when it comes to personal struggle, which is something that in our communities we are still lacking when it comes to our children and when it comes to ourselves and our identities, and coming to terms with that and being okay with it, and being okay with it based on evidence, based on information, based on, verification. These are principles, these are things that everyone should be, this is how everyone should be living their lives. Is not just taking anyone's word or just accepting anything at face value. And also, like you mentioned, like seeing the light. It's interesting to, when we talk about that definitely that sense of liberation and what it means to stand strong with an identity. And our one of my favorite principles of Kwanzaa is Kujichagulia, and I grew up on Kwanzaa. Um, the ability to define ourselves, name ourselves and speak for ourselves and create for ourselves. This is what we have the ability to do. This is the legacy of the Black community. It is not just one of struggle, it is one of excellence, it is one of resistance. And this is what we need to remind each other of. That we love, I love my community, I love my people. And so to see so many of them again wrap themselves in this idea of, there's just going to be this divine premise that guides us through everything, actually robs us of that legacy, even for the religious folks who didn't just sit on that. So there is a lot for us, there's a lot that America, the Black community, and more can learn, especially from those of us in the Black community who are still representing a smaller segment of the population, but again, it's growing. And to educate yourself beyond what you've been taught, even from people who did it out of a sense of love and caring. It is okay to, like you said before, the religious folks haven't always gotten it right. Mama and daddy didn't always get it right. Grandma and grandpa didn't always get it right. And it doesn't mean that you want to point out what they did wrong, but at least acknowledge that there were things that could have been done better. But and now that we have more information that we're able to do better, then we absolutely should. And just continuing to move forward with that progressive, lens, and like I said, looking at our human principles and what we do and how we can help each other, how we can help each other heal and move forward. Is going to be very, very important for all of us to understand and all of us to work on.
Thank you for that, Mandy. It's two things I want to do before we leave for today. One is just thank you for being a friend and also taking the time to talk to us about Black non-believers. But also I want to extend an invitation for when we work on different things on the Hill here with legislation that deals with religious freedom. We want to hear your voice. We want you to be around. And when you are dealing with things where you are dealing with bills, whether it's in Georgia, and I know Black non-believers have different chapters in different
Mhm.
cities in the United States. Let us know how we can help and push forward this faith freedom for all and faith freedom from from faith, freedom from faith in the context of where it can help you and many other people around. And personally, thank you because you make conversations in my family easier by being able to
Cool.
talk to you and talk through that. So I want to say thank you for everybody that joined us. We keep these conversations short and concise, but you can always find more things about Mandisa on blacknonbelievers.com, right?
Dot .org.
That's
Yeah.
.org, excuse me,
Blacknonbelievers.org. Uh-huh.
blacknonbelievers.org. You brought up the fact that, we haven't always got it right as faith believers and Christians. I always want to mention on these programs our work of Christians against Christian nationalism, where we fight the cover of white supremacy with patriotism. And you got to be a Christian to be a patriot and an American. And you got to be, in order to be a good American, you got to be a Christian and white. And Black non-believers is evidence that that's not true.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
not true at all. So please join us in that fight. If we have any Christian people that are on this Facebook Live, Christians Against Christian Nationalism.org, sign that. And also, just to let you know, an update from next week. Well, we'll be talking to Dr. Timothy T. Body and his daughter, former BJC intern Maya Body, about faith freedom and what it means for different generations of Black people. And so, hey, as always, this program that you see today will be up on Facebook Live, and this recording will also be on our YouTube channel. So, thank you again, Mandy. Hope to see you again soon in person. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you once again for having me. This was a pleasure. I really appreciate this conversation and giving an opportunity for others to learn more and also to do more if they choose.
when we say for all at BJC, we do mean all. Thank you.
Thank you.